So, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Apprentice One-to-One podcast. I have another great guest with me today who I've been speaking with on Instagram for a number of months now. We're going to have a chat and see about his experience and journey in the electrical industry and some of the key insights he's got to share with us all today. So, before we get into all of that, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Hi, I'm Aidan, and I think I'm a level 3 apprentice.
You think that's already an insightful first statement. Fantastic. So I speak to you primarily over on Instagram. Is that the social media platform you use mostly?
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to contact Aidan, I'll drop his Instagram handle in the description of this podcast, and he can give us a shout out of it now if you like.
I believe it's Aiden_Spark. I think.
There we go. We think. So what are you doing at the moment then, Aidan? You're in college and in employment, are you, at this present time?
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a bumpy ride because I'm a 22-year-old apprentice. So it was a bit harder to begin with. But I've done my level 2, my level 3, and I'm doing my MVQ now. But yeah, I've been working for this company for about 3 or 4 months, and it's good, to be honest. It's been a bit bumpy, but we're getting there slowly.
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite bumpy for everyone over the last couple of years. You had to kind of swap around employers then through your apprenticeship, or is this your first employed role while you've been learning?
No. So if you go back a few years, I was actually a school leaver, went straight into college, did my level 2, and then I was doing my level 3. Halfway through my level 3, the company that I worked with, they declared bankruptcy, and
Right.
obviously I lost my job. And a young lad at the time, I had a car, and loads of other things, and I couldn't find another job to get into. So then I went in down the horrible road of warehouse work, and it was just a horrible route to go down, but I had to do it to keep like my overheads in place. And then after that, I lost the job. I lost my warehouse job due to COVID. So I moved up with my girlfriend's family. They've been awesome, supporting me all the way. And during COVID, I used the opportunity because I wasn't working to go ahead and do my level 3. So I finished that, and then I went to the guy that I'm with now and just knocked on his door because he was a local electrician. I said, "Have you got any jobs going?" And he went, "I'm actually going into the college to speak about it."
Timing.
Yeah. So he come into college, and um, there was about 25 of us, and he picked me, and he just picked one person, and it was me. Even though um, I'm not, I won't go into great detail, but my driving license isn't clean. So I had a few things against me. And the other guys, they were younger. None of them had worked before. They had clean licenses. They didn't have any experience though. Whereas my dad is a builder, so grew up going to work with him on Saturday, Sunday, and then I did a bit of self-employed stuff down the road. So I had all this experience, as well as the company that I was previously at. They did massive commercial work, so you're pulling in armors every day, you're messing with like big cables, and it was all on a plan, and you just know what you're doing that day. Whereas this guy I'm working for now is like a one-man band, but there's a few people he employs as well as me, and he's gave me a lot of responsibility, to be honest, and he does trust me with what I'm doing. But it's completely different from commercial industrial.
Oh, I can imagine it's totally different stepping out of that into a role like you've got now. And what you've described is typical of how people tend to find each other when they are one-man bands. It's more the relationship and the first impact you can make on them when you're trying to get that job. And we'll talk about that later in the podcast because I think you put that down as one of your topics. You want to discuss some of the advice you can give to people who are trying to go down that path and get the attention of an employer. It sounds like you've got a great insight on that one. In terms of your college learning, how's that gone for you? Have you had site assessments and things, or has all your learning been in a college environment and then you're trying to build the portfolio up afterwards? What's your actual path with that one?
As of now, I haven't actually done anything with college, because I don't know if you're aware of it, but um, it was a bit of a hassle if level threes could actually take that MVQ and be given the funding for it.
Yeah,
So it was, forwards and backwards with the college asking like, well, why can't we have the MVQ for him, and like, why can't he get the grant and all this? And in the end, they gave us the grants. So it's a bit slow with the MVQ. But my assessor did actually call me today, and he's planning on coming out next week to give the review, the 5-week review or something like that.
fantastic. That's
Yeah.
great. So is that to do with your age then, the funding of the NVQ, or just the fact you've already done your level 1, 2, and 3, stopping them being able to claim funding for your NVQ aspect? Do you actually know what the reason for that was in the delay?
Yeah, so it was a lot of people I think have actually had it, but it was based on off the top of my head, I don't know the terminology that they used, but it was basically I didn't have enough experience for them to get the grant, or I had too
Right.
much experience for them to say, well, you can't work with him because you got too much experience or whatever.
Yeah.
But then the JTL route, they were still offering it, so
Mhm.
that was like plan B, if you will.
Yeah. 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 No, it's a tricky situation. And there's quite a few people who are kind of messaging in the Apprentice one-to-one community from saying similar sort of things, that they have had issues with the colleges trying to get their MVQs sorted out. And like yourself, they do seem to have eventually got there, but not without some complaining and shouting and
Yeah.
screaming in the background, which is sad that it has to go to that extent. But at the end of the day, as long as you've got sorted out and you've got that for free, that's the main thing. And they're getting an
Yeah.
assessor out as well to come and see you, another fantastic win. So I assume the fact you're doing your MVQ and your training, you see that as a valuable qualification to attain. That's something you're going to be proud of when you've finished it, because there are still those elements of discussion in the industry that perhaps it's not what it once was. For me,
Yeah.
I disagree with that entirely. I think it's still a great flag in the ground we can all make as a first step into this industry.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what your opinion on that is.
Um, it's there's two sides to it, isn't there?
Yeah.
I do think it's a valuable thing, because I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day saying how people can pay just for their qualification,
Yeah.
and the MVQ sort of validates what somebody knows, because you have the AM2 test, which is done by an independent company, and I do believe it's something good and something that people should do, because it sort of separates people that don't know what they're doing to people that do know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is true. And it is, like you say, it's one of those where you can see both sides of the argument. And while people can pay for these things illegitimately, it does devalue from the people who have attained it correctly. And we all have different experiences in our learning with our employers as well. We're not all lucky and get a fantastic employer. Some of us end up just doing containment for 4 years and then kind of chucked out the other side into your AM2 with no proper preparation. So it is, there are issues to tackle, but ultimately I think it is something we should be still holding up as that flag in the ground, that we say this is your first point in qualifying into the trade. I want to dive into your list now, because this is a podcast that is primarily for you, and some of the topics you want to discuss are quite relevant. Well, they all are actually. I'm just going to pick them out rather than go through them in the order you've sent. And the first one I'm seeing is qualification handouts, which kind of ties in with what we've just been discussing. So what is it you're meaning around that one?
So I won't go too deep into it, but let's just say there was some people on my level 3 course that wasn't particularly doing very well, but at the end of it, they still gained the qualification. Now, I don't know the political thing around a college having a certain pass rate or whatnot, but you could just tell that they wasn't putting in the effort that other people were, and going to the extent that other people were, but they still come out the other side with their qualification. I just think that's something that needs to get cracked down on. Like, if they don't want to be there, then they shouldn't get it, to be honest.
Exactly. I mean, that's all about holding that standard, isn't it? So if you've got a standard that people need to reach, if they're not hitting that mark, then they shouldn't be passing as completing it, really. That's essentially it. And some of the other podcasts I've had with Craig, who came on, he was saying similar sort of stuff, actually, that when his role as an IQA and a lecturer, they kind of had targets to achieve for getting people through the training. And there was financial incentives for the colleges to ensure that that happened. So while I'm sure that there are a lot of colleges who do things properly, you know, while there is that monkey on the back that they need to get money in to keep the doors open, you know, you can see why they might lean on a few people who maybe otherwise wouldn't have made it to have completed that particular course. But it must be really frustrating when you know yourself you've put the effort in and reached that level, and then you see in other people who maybe haven't. I can totally understand that.
Well, I mean, to be honest, it's like looking at it now, half of them are like 16, 17-year-olds that never worked a day in their life, and they've just been in school all their life. To be honest, I bet they're kind of sick of it. But as I did half my level 3 and then had to do it again, and the job that I hated, but I did just because I needed the money, I kind of looked at it and was like, I need to do this. I need to get the highest grade I can. I need to be the best, sort of thing. But no, I can see both sides, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's, well, a lot of employers will say that young people now aren't motivated, aren't interested. And I think they're seeing a pool of those people who you're talking about in the college as well, and they're kind of closing their eyes to people like yourself who are desperate to be electricians. You know, that's not everybody. You know, there is some people who really want this. And it's trying to filter that out, I guess, the way people enter into the industry out of school as well. We need to be trying to encourage some of the people who are sent to more academic routes to look at apprenticeships a bit more as well, because often what happens is schools kind of push people down that way when they've not really done very well academically. So that's something that we need to look at. We need to do better, I think, as an industry to entice people to want to be electricians and get more people like yourself. I'm going to look at one of these other ones on your list now. We've got expectations of apprentices. So is that around kind of their abilities at what they're doing on site or day-to-day life? What do you mean with that one?
Just in general, like, what's an expectation of apprentice? Are they somebody that just grabs a coffee, or are they, you know, because like when I was an apprentice, that's all I did was you make the coffee, you know, you get sent to the wholesaler to go and get a Skyhook or a left-handed screwdriver, or you know, it's them, and it does make people, and it builds the character, and it is a good laugh, but beyond that, what is their expectation of them? Are they somebody that's supposed to just hit the ground running, or do you have to build on them? Because I've been with a few different companies. Like the first one was just commercial, the second one was fire alarms, and the one I'm with now is purely domestic. And they all had different expectations, and all in the right mind. But I just wanted your view. Like, if you took on an apprentice tomorrow, what would your expectation be of them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, we do have apprentices in our business, and like you say, there are elements that you get in construction where there's a bit of mickey taking and some fun and jokes, and while it's enjoyable both ways round, that's okay. But when it's every day that somebody's been sent to the wholesalers on these bloody tasks that lead them nowhere, or making teas and coffees endlessly and just chasing backwards and forward to the van non-stop, they're not actually learning. They're not being given, you know, the part of the training that they're signing up for. So we do actively encourage our apprentices to take on these electrical tasks primarily, but it is a case of, you know, taking it a slow step at a time. So we'll introduce first and foremost the kind of acceptance to work. A lot of young people aren't used to a work environment, so it's making sure they're up on time, they're in the right uniform, that they've got their gear with them, they understand the health and safety aspects, so they're safe at work. And then we can kind of build up a little bit where we might introduce pulling cables and how you would strip and cut cabling, for example. And as the apprenticeship builds, you kind of move it on to some of the more advanced tasks, consumer units first, distribution boards, maybe some of the cable designs. I mean, we even include how you would deal with customers when you're kind of pricing jobs and quoting as well, and all the customer relations stuff. And generally you get a better experience of that in the domestic sector because you're in and around the customers at more close quarters. So yeah, we do try and actually fulfill our obligation as employers towards the apprentices. But, you know, I'm not blinkered to the fact that out in industry, you will have people turning up to site where their expectation is they're going to carry all the conduit up 8 flights of stairs. And then they're going to be chucking containment at the wall for 4 years, or making teas and coffees, and they're not getting the well-rounded. We have all these aspects we sign up to as employers. That meeting should take place with the college, the learner, and the employer, where you're all given these things that need to be provided during the course of the apprenticeship. And if you're not doing that, then you're not playing your part. And some of the lecturers have said actually that's about binding things together a bit better. So at the minute we kind of have college and the apprentice, and then the employer and the apprentice, and it's not really married in the way that it should be. So we do try really hard. We're lucky with our local college. They are really good. And that's the kind of thing we want to try and see across the rest of the industry as well. Because from the messages that come in every day, I know that that's not especially common. Hopefully you find that with your college and your assessor and your employer, as it all starts coming together now in the last little bit of your training.
I mean, to be honest, they have got better. They were a bit slow at the start, but they have got better. Oh, sorry, just while we're on colleges, I did want to ask something. So I asked my lecturer, how fast can I do my NVQ? And he said you could do it in 8 months if you just put your head down. I said, okay. I asked my assessor how long it would take to do an NVQ, and he said 1 year and 1 day.
I mean, that really putting pressure on yourself to do it quickly has positives and negatives, because obviously everybody wants to get it sorted and done as quickly as they can. Ultimately, as long as you're evidencing the work that needs to be demonstrated in that NVQ, there's no real time frame on it. It's just a case of you presenting the evidence that you've done that particular element of the NVQ in the portfolio, and then that everybody is happy that you're prepared to go and do your AM2. So I don't know if you've been on the NET website yet, but they have a checklist on there that tells you all of the things you need to be prepared for to take your AM2. All the stuff you need to know. There's a pre-assessment checklist, they call it, and your employer has to look through that. You have to look through it, and your college, and make sure you're at the right level to step up and take that. And I would kind of say when you're at that kind of point and your portfolio's done and complete, that's the time it would take. If putting a figure on it, it's different for everybody, really. We all learn and absorb information at different rates. We all put different amounts of effort in our own spare time. You could be sat there at home 6 hours a day working on it, where somebody else might only put 10 minutes a week in. That really is on you. I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong answer to that, to be honest. One of the other things on your list is, well, let's go for a different one. Let's look at the apprentices doing an EICR. So is that a position you found yourself in?
Yes. Actually, just really quick, show you. These are the stacks of reports I've done.
Okay. So how have you found that? What's your thoughts on that? Have you been doing that unsupervised, or have you had someone with you?
So I would say, because we do a lot of work for estate agencies, so because of the new regulation, a house needs to be tested when a tenant leaves and when a tenant gets in. So we've found ourselves in a tight situation where we've had since I joined, we've had EICRs every single day, and I do I do at least one a day, and then the remedial work that needs to be done. At the minute we're doing 2 a day, which you do finish a bit later, but I don't mind late finishes. It's it comes with the job. But the first 2 months I was doing them, I was supervised. So it was like, this is how we do it. This is the things that we do. And then they sort of took a step back and watched me do it, because I was fresh out my level 3. They teach you testing inspection. Well, the college I went to, it was just testing inspection, and the tutor was amazing at it. But the certificates were slightly different in college than they are now, because the company I work for is NAPID accredited. So they've got their own sort of deal. But no, there is days when it's like, oh God, I've got to do another one. And there's days like, oh yeah, I've just got a nice easy day. It's relaxed. It's just doing these certificates. But it can be quite challenging at sometimes.
I mean, when it's a an apprentice. I mean, I assume you haven't done your 239 one. You've just done your
No.
level 3 testing
Yeah.
inspection. Yeah. So I mean, if you were looking at it from the EAS specification point of view, to be doing periodic inspection, you should really have done your 2391 if you're unsupervised and have a level of experience to be doing it. But I mean, that's a discussion between you and your employer. At the end of the day, that's on them, that they're happy having seen your working standards for you to be doing that. If you've got the relevant experience and you know how to do the testing, there is an argument for it, but it's not something I would do as an employer. I wouldn't be asking you to go out doing unsupervised EICRs. That's just due to the experience, really. You don't know what you don't know in some situations. Some domestic jobs are going to be really easy. Some of them are going to be quite complex and difficult. We've had one just recently where Matthew, he's 2 years out of his time now. So he's 24, he's just a little bit older than you. And he actually asked for my opinion and input on it. He did his 2391 when he was 21. So you need to have that support with you as well. And hopefully you get that with your employer. It's a common issue that there's people doing EICRs who aren't what you would term qualified in that role. It is prevalent because we don't have that skilled workforce available to fulfill the PRS requirement. You're talking about thousands of EICRs that have come out of nowhere into industry. And unfortunately, we need to build up that pool of people who can do them, and hopefully the rates that have been paid for that as well start to reflect that. It is a battle. What do you feel comfortable doing them? Are you actually happy with what you're producing? Do you think you're doing a good job overall?
Well, I mean, something that has been invaluable to me is the NAPIC code breakers. It's one thing. If you buy it, you'll never regret it. And I went and brought that, and then I actually told my boss, and he actually credited the money that I paid for it. Because he said it's something you need. And then he issued me a copy of the inspection and testing book, the IET one, and then the regs book, and he's just gave me everything I need to sort of hit the ground running. But jumping back, when I was apprentice for the other company, I was doing EICRs supervised, and then with the alarm company, I was commissioning fire alarms, and it's sort of something I've always been around, so I understand faults and everything like that. And I think he could see from day one when he first put me on that I knew what I was doing, and I have got the experience behind me.
I mean, you've done your level 3, so you've got testing inspection included in that, and if you've got the interest and keenness to want to do it, your employer's seeing that day to day, and that's their judgment call. And the NAPIC code breakers book you've referenced is fantastic. That is a really good start point. There are some codes in there that people will disagree with. We all, as you'll find, as you start moving into your own career, within 10 years' time, you'll have had thousands of arguments and discussions with people over codes. We like to do that. As long as you're comfortable and you're spotting most of the problems, and you've got your boss checking over your paperwork, it can be made to work.
He's always on the end of the phone. Because there's a local church near us, and that needed an EICR, and he just threw me into it and was like, "If you need me, I'm just around the corner." And he was, and there was loads of questions I fired at him, like, do we test mineral insulated at a different voltage, and all this different stuff that I wasn't, I have worked on pyro, but not a lot. But he was there, and I called him, he come round and he explained everything, and he is really good like that.
I mean, that's the supervision aspect of it, because you need to be given the experience to do this kind of work. So if he's giving you that opportunity and then supervising that it's been done properly, that's fine. Sounds like a little good system you've got there. So we'll move on to one of your other topics, and we have got bad habits. So we all have those. Is this to do sort of with the day-to-day of like where you might be doing something that you maybe shouldn't, just because you've always done it that way?
It's Gary from GSH. He's like, don't use your earth to strip DNA, and it's something that I think we all do. It's just But
there's the textbook way to do things, and then there's the way you actually can do things. They're not always the same thing.
But I've found myself, because of these EICRs I'm doing, it is a lot of testing. And I wouldn't change it, because like I'm doing my MVQ now, and it's preparing me for my AM2. And the faults that I come across daily, and I'm getting over them, and the experience that it's putting on me, it's invaluable. But I find myself gaining a few bad habits that I thought if I was being tested, then they would probably be like, well, you shouldn't be doing that. And
yes. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the AM2 assessors are quite rigid, and myself and Neil had a discussion about that actually, where the safe isolation procedure they use is just locking off an MCB, for example, and we wouldn't consider that in the industries we work as being safely isolated because the neutral's still in circuit. But as part of your AM2 safe isolation procedure, that's what you actually have to do. So, you know, there's elements there you need to really look into. And the NET have got an app out now with sparking injury on it. So I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
But that takes you through the whole test and inspection element of the AM2 assessment. So that's a really good one to go through when you're preparing for your AM2. And if Gary's telling you a certain way of stripping cables as well, that will be from the textbook that you need to be working to as part of that as well. And you know what? All electricians are the same. Anyone who tells you they've not stripped 2.5 cable with the CPC is a liar in 99% of the cases.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's just the way we do it. And you can have the argument as well that if you're using a knife to do it, there's all the health and safety now around using blades and things. So there's always a way to find an argument that that's wrong with everything. I still maintain that if we wanted to, we could find a regulation or a rule somewhere that nothing would ever actually be allowed to be done anywhere. So there's actually the real world and then the textbook world, and depth stripping is one of them. And as you said, it's drilling yourself out of those bad habits when you actually need to be in the zone doing it correctly to the book, like with your driving test. You know, do we all do that mirror signal maneuver every single time? You know, we don't, if we're honest, do we? It's just the way it is. One of the things that you can get complacent with and should be something that you really do try and knuckle down on it is if you're doing ZS measurements and trying to make sure you're as safe as possible at all times with that, and with your live working and exposing live parts as well. Sometimes when you're in a rush, those bad habits can creep in where you're opening stuff up without the circuit being isolated. So that's one of the real ones to keep a watch on. Keep yourself safe as a primary concern. So one of the other things you've got is learning difficulties. So is that something that's relevant to yourself? If you've got an experience of that?
Yeah, so I am actually dyslexic.
Okay.
And I listened to one of your podcasts before, and I went in and did a bit of research about it because I was quite interested when you was talking about dyslexic people, and there is a lot of dyslexic people in. And when I was at school, because I do want to voice this because I think it is a good thing. When I was at school, I was diagnosed with it, and it doesn't affect me massively, but you can tell I am dyslexic.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, I'm not going to be the same as any other person. I've got something wrong with me, and it's completely wrong. That mindset is completely wrong, because it's the other day I was talking to a work colleague and I had a view on something, and dyslexia, in my opinion, makes you think of things slightly differently, and you have a different view over any other person. But yeah, it's just one of them things. You know, you can't spell quite as good as everybody else, but you do have certain elements. And if anybody is listening to this with dyslexia and you find something hard or whatever, if I can complete my level 3, anybody can. It's just one of them things. You just got to overcome it. And to any bullies out there with, it's just not even worth acknowledging.
No, I mean, anybody who's in receipt of messages I send will know that my use of the English language due to dyslexia is awful. And there's loads of people in this electrical industry. I mean, I don't know if you know Craig O'Neill, who's one of the smartest guys I think there is out there in the electrical industry. He's got dyslexia. There's Will's Electrical over on Instagram as well. There's loads of people who I've been speaking to, and like you say, it's really, really prevalent. I don't know if that is a trait of people with dyslexia or it's just something that I've seen since starting Apprentice 1-to-1 that I don't know. I've not done the research, but it is really prevalent in a lot of electricians that I know who are dyslexic.
Yeah. Well, I did do a bit of research, and it was like 90% of people with dyslexia will go for a hands-on job, like they'll be working with their hands opposed to an office job, which I didn't even know.
No, it's news to me, but it's certainly probably what I'm noticing, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, you make a great point with the bullies as well. If there is anyone out there giving people stick over that, you're a disgrace, and don't take any notice of them. As Aidan said, it doesn't stop you being an electrician. Far from it. It could be a strength more than a weakness.
Yeah.
It's not something that can be trained out of anybody either. That's often something that schools try and do, that they can drill out dyslexia from a person. You can learn to kind of understand what's happening, but ultimately it's something that you just have to learn to live with. That's certainly my experience anyway.
Yeah.
One of your others on the list, we've got implementing new skills.
Yeah. So the other day I was doing something, and the college had taught me how to do it in this specific way. And then one of my work colleagues says, "Have you done it this way before?" And I was like, "No." And I did it, and it was faster, it was easier, and it was just, now I just do it all the time. And it's just one of them things, like some of the stuff, it's like you find it a lot harder to actually do it and implement it into your daily like routine. Whereas some things is slightly easier. I just thought, have you had anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we all have moments like that, especially with social media now, where you see people doing stuff in a certain way, and you think, actually, that's a really good idea. There was one the other day, and I've forgotten what it is now. It's totally left my mind, but somebody had blown my mind with something they were doing that I didn't realize was possible. It'll come to me as soon as we stop recording, I'm sure. But yeah, it happens every week where you're in your set ways of doing something, and you've done it like that forever and a day, and then you just kind of catch somebody else, on social media or you're working with, and you think, actually, that's much better than the way I was doing it. Why have I never thought of that? That's having an open mind to learn stuff. And there's never been a better time. Sam says this often on his podcast. Never been a better time to learn to be an electrician, because we're surrounded by all this information. You've got YouTube, there's Instagram, even on TikTok now and all of that. You've got all of these tips that people are giving you, sharing new tools and ideas. I think it's fantastic. So we all need to have an open mind and then take that on board to try and develop those new skills. So you do get the arguments that people want to see the old school methods still, like you mentioned with pyro, and understanding how to terminate and look after that. And that's really, really relevant. We don't want to lose all of the old skills out of the industry. But if there are tools that can make things faster and easier for us, I mean, you've got the Nipex Ergo strip thing. That's fantastic, and it saves a lot of time and aggravation. You've got the DeWalt cable stapler now. If you're putting lots of twin and earth up, there's all this stuff that saves us time and help, and it's just opening your mind to it. So that's a great topic as well. Nice shout with that one. We've got here best routes for apprentices. So that's coming back to one of the very first things we mentioned, rewinding right to the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah.
So you want to dive into that and explain what you mean there?
Yeah. So, like, you've got the traditional route. So you go to college, you do it traditionally. And I heard you talking about like people pay for qualifications or whatever. And that's something I've never come across, because I know you can go to like, I don't know if it's like Open University and do your qualification that way. But it's something that I've never seen. It's always been like, you go to college, you do your MVQ, you get an apprenticeship, you finish it, and then you're fully qualified.
Yeah.
To say. But yeah, I just wanted to, if you know any other ways of being an electrician, or
I mean, as a young person, that will be your experience, because you're not the target market for these training providers, to be honest, because you can get that free training. For a lot of older people who are coming into the industry, they don't have access to a free apprenticeship. They have to pay for it, and also often, due to your own experience you've had as well with working in the warehouse, that reduction in wages is difficult when you've got a family to support and things. So there's these short courses you can take to obtain the qualifications you need to get entry into somebody like the NIC or NAPIT, and then start working self-employed. That's typically a route that will happen, and it costs several £1,000s. Some of the courses range from a couple of weeks, and some of them can go up to a year, but essentially they all kind of do the same thing. And I don't know if you've seen the recent campaign from TESP. So that's the Electro-Technical Skills Partnership, where they're kind of trying to highlight the issue with rope trainers. They've put a little animation together to try and make people aware of these things, this pressure selling of training courses, where somebody will promise you can be a qualified electrician and earn X amount of money every year. We just need £7,000 from you today, or whatever it is, and here's a loan provider who can give you that money. We can help support you with that application and stuff. So that does go on. And then you'll end up with people who've gone through that route and they still need to fill in a portfolio like you do and do their AM2, and trying to find an employer who will take them on in that position and give them the experience they need is really, really hard. And a lot of them fall out of the industry at that point, having been taken for a ride essentially and had their money taken from them. You know, it is something that happens definitely for people who are older. It's not so much of an issue for people your age. I think it's if once you get over 24, it starts to become a problem with funding of your training. But yeah, it definitely does happen. You can become an electrician through a short course. The EAS document changed again in September. So that's what actually defines a qualified supervisor, if you like, to work in the electrical industry. And that's now basically moved back towards just accepting the NVQ system. So people who've gone through a training route such as yourself. So it's trying to stop these short courses having a point of entry into a CPS, for example. But obviously the training companies are clever businesses, and they've come up with ways already to kind of navigate around that. There are courses springing up, sadly. So yeah, it is a problem.
Yeah.
So I think we've got another question here. It is, what skills and things impress? So is that another question for me? What things? Skills yeah. I mean, are you talking about somebody who's coming in fresh to the industry, or when you're qualified?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I first started, I didn't know a great deal. Like, obviously, I had the experience off my dad. So I knew how to strip cable. And there was me and another apprentice on the first company I worked for, and it was actually me sort of helping him strip cable, pull cable, different things like that. So I do consider myself quite lucky in that aspect, because I had a bit of a head start on a few other people. But I was just curious, because I sort of hit the ground running with this, and I've never had to learn how to strip cable or pull cable, or all the other things that you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, having that background as well with your dad in construction, that's a big win, because a lot of it is work ethic. That's what we're looking for at the outset. It's something in people which you're trying to see if they're motivated to actually be there and wanting to have a job and work in the industry. Because as Neil says on the podcast often, he believes if you've got someone like that, you can teach anyone to be an electrician. You can put them through that training, they'll absorb it and they can do it. So that's not really something that we're looking at the outset. It's more your character, if you like, and your work ethic. That's a key factor. So if you're going for interviews and putting yourself in front of employers, especially in the domestic market, showing that you're actually interested, showing that you're really keen and motivated and hardworking is one of the best things you can do. In my opinion, they're not really looking for what your existing qualifications and experience might be, although it doesn't hurt. When you're moving on in your career, then definitely being able to demonstrate your skills and showing that you've absorbed your training and you know how to strip cable effectively, and you're becoming competent with your hand skills and such. That's important, don't get me wrong, but at the beginning it is more your attitude to things, and looking for ways to get an employer as well. Kind of touching on that, some of the best things you can do is to get around your wholesale network. I've said that before. So go into your local independent wholesalers, your big national chains, leave a CV with them, try and get to know the people behind the counter, because not everyone's going to be as lucky as you and stumble upon someone who's looking for an apprentice at that exact moment.
Yeah.
So, getting your face out there and showing that you are actually searching for that can be a big win for you. And you can do that on social media as well, by messaging people on their Facebook pages and Instagram accounts and stuff, and getting yourself known. So one of the last, I think this is your last one actually, and this is employers. Yeah. Oh no, sorry, that's that last. What skills and things impress employers? So I've misread that. So we've covered that one off. That's me not reading properly. So I think we've kind of touched on all of that. I've got a couple of questions for you before we end this, though, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
One of them is, what would your tips be to an apprentice coming into the industry in terms of tools? What's some basic setup you would kind of suggest people have for, under 200 quid? We're not going to go mad. And what would be your tips if they were looking to get some stuff ready for starting out in a job?
I mean, it depends what level they are, like what level they're coming in. But if they're fresh, like
Yeah,
level
fresh
one,
in. This is right at
yeah,
the beginning.
I would definitely recommend them Nipex 5-in-1s. So like
Good shout.
yeah,
Awesome.
because I brought them and I never look back. I always use them. And you've got long nose pliers, strippers, cutters, everything you need for about £70, I think.
Yeah.
And then I just get like a flathead screwdriver, like a VDE one, flathead screwdriver, probably a Posi 2, because that's all you're really going to need.
Yeah.
And then like a Stanley knife.
Yep. Fantastic. That's a great setup you've got there in that kit already. It's amazing.
I think you could do anything with them in as an apprentice.
I mean, we've had loads of people suggest answers to that. It's one I ask everybody. And some of the older guys on there have come up with some nonsense answers, to be honest. And I include me in that. So listen to Aidan. He's just gone through that journey and he's given some absolute belters there. So if you're looking for some gear to get yourself started out, cracking shout with all of that stuff.
I'd definitely invest in code breakers as well. That is something you will use later on in life.
Yes, definitely. And again, you can get a digital copy of that. You don't have to get the actual physical book. So there's a discount on that, I think, if you're employers with NAPIT as well.
Yes.
So look at that. It's a great book. Another good shout. So one of the last question, actually, before we end this, is about you, really. Where do you see yourself going? What are your plans for the future? If you had a magic wand you could wave for yourself, where would you like to go into the industry? Have you got ambitions to have your own company? Do you want to go into a different sector? Or are you happy where you're at?
I mean, I'm going to stop with my current employer for well, hopefully forever. But because he's such a nice guy, and I've never met a boss or anybody like him, because they're all like hard on you. Whereas he'll be tough on you when it needs to be tough. And he's so approachable. It's unreal, and I've never met anybody like him. So I would like to stop with him for a few years, but I would like to go back into commercial industrial, because I really like the work environment, how you've got all the trades working together, and I mean everybody slags each other off on site, and it's just one of them. But I did like it, but I mean I can't really say.
No, I mean, you don't know what the future's going to hold, do you? We all have aims and ambitions, and I know Matthew, who works with me now, he's kind of built a role for himself where he essentially runs my business now. So who knows? That could be an option for you. You just don't know where things are going to go, do you? But the fact you're desperate to get finished with your training and be an electrician is fantastic quality to have. So to keep going with that. Anything I can do to help, you're more than welcome to ask whenever you like. And if you want any pointers towards the NET stuff, if you're preparing for your AM2, that Sparking Ninja app is incredible. And again, going through the pre-assessment checklist. And looking out for the information from TESP as well. That's some great resources for people going on that route. So I can point you at all that if you need to. Otherwise, thank you for taking the time to come and chat with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'll try and get this edited together as quickly as I can, and with your agreement, out on a podcast and a YouTube video so people can see this and hopefully get some value out of it. Anything else you want to say before we disappear?
Oh yeah, I will add something. So I was talking to my boss the other day, and it was one of them things, like, because I've saw a bit of industrial and a bit of domestic, and a lot of young lads at the college were like, no, I don't want to do domestic. That's horrible, house bashing. But I can honestly say you will learn everything you need to know as an electrician from domestic. There's so many hurdles that you have to overcome, and it will set you up for life if you go into that. And I would suggest going into domestic first and then into industrial and commercial, because industrial and commercial, it's completely different. You get drawings, and if there's a hole that needs to be knocked in the wall, you just do it because somebody else is going to patch you up after you. Whereas domestic, you have to think about it. Oh, what's the easiest route for this? And you'll learn life skills, I think, doing domestic.
Yeah, I can echo that. We work in all sectors in our business, and certainly I agree domestic is a great place to start apprentices out and then move them on into other industries. It's not possible for most employers. Neil, for example, works in rail. So one of the things we want to try and do as our little community is enable these kind of job swaps between apprentices, if you like. So you can get a 4-week placement where you might swap around a domestic electrician with an industrial one, just to try and give that experience of everything. And as Sam often annoyingly says, that industrial sparks are kings of the electrical trade. I disagree with that. I think there's a lot of value in being a domestic electrician, with your life skills and dealing with customers day to day. You're in someone's home at the end of the day, aren't you? That's their castle. Been around their possessions and, you know, got their health and well-being in mind as well. There's so many different factors to just going into a big industrial place where you're working to a plan and RAMs. So yeah, good shout. Totally agree with that. Thank you again for coming on, Aidan. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to everyone for tuning into this episode of the Apprentice One-to-One podcast. Hopefully we'll be back again soon with someone else. If you want to come on and have a chat, drop a message over as Aidan has. This is an open platform for anybody who's got a story to tell and wants to have a little hour-long discussion with me. That door is always open. Thank you, Aidan.
Cheers, Mark.